Imagine if the house were on fire. You wake up in the middle of the night, the alarms are ringing away. What do you grab? What do you take? Well, the first thing, obviously, is you make sure that the kids, that any loved ones in the house are up and on their way out of the house. Get the pets going and try and get them safely secured. But if there's something there that you see, what would you grab? Would it be your wallet? Would it be your laptop? Would it be your wedding photos? What would it be? There's a certain urgency in a question like that also is heard, I think, in today's gospel. The man comes up, the scribe comes up and says, which is the first of the commandments? Wants to know, because what is tied with that question? Right worship. What is tied with that question? Nothing but pleasing God. What is tied with that question? What is the first commandment? Is how do I live today? How do I live today? And Jesus gives an answer that we are so familiar with. Love God and love your neighbor. He actually recites as the first part of that answer the quintessential Jewish prayer. It's called the Shema, recited daily by faithful Jews. They often will cover their eyes when they say it so as to enact a posture of non-distraction. Nothing should keep them from loving God. You see, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, those words prayed across the world by Jews. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart. Therein lies the essential secret to happiness. If we experience God's love first and foremost in our lives, then we will know that we're on the right path in true joy. But that's not enough. True love must also flow from our love of God, or more importantly, more accurately, our being loved by God, to love of our neighbor. That's way harder. That's way harder, I think. But let's step back and say, what is love? St. Thomas Aquinas, the greatest of all our theologians, said, love is willing the good of the other as other. What does that mean? It means loving somebody expecting nothing in return. Expecting nothing in return. Now, loving our neighbor is not the same thing of liking our neighbor, is not necessarily approving of our neighbor, but rather still willing their good above all else. And as we are in the midst of this presidential election cycle, do we need this love more than ever? Absolutely. This is the letter that I wrote to the entire diocese, calling us to move beyond ugly rhetoric into loving each other, willing the good, working together for the common good. But how do you love them back? How do you love somebody when you don't even want to spend Thanksgiving with them? That's what's going on in our culture. It goes back to the first commandment, back to the Shema, back to the love of God. If we experience that love authentically in our lives, if we allow ourselves to be loved, not because we're so fabulous, but rather in spite of the fact that none of us is that fabulous, we experience that God has willed us into being and called us into life, then we start to experience what true love is, and we realize that this is the love that we are called to share with each other. There's an old French adage, how does God forgive all? Even those who hung him on a cross, even those, how can he? And the answer is because he understands all. He knows the weaknesses, the imperfections of the human life. He knows our woundedness. He knows that the place from where unlove comes is not the place of our healing and wholeness. It's the place of our brokenness. And he understands that and sent his Son as the remedy to heal us in that place. And so he wishes to do for all, not just those we like, but those we find especially difficult to like. So the house is on fire. We never know when we're going to be called, brothers and sisters. And we must live in love. We must live in forgiveness. We must live in healing. Heaven is a no-grudge zone, and you're not going to get there if you're carrying a whole bunch of them in. So let them go and love each other as the other, expecting nothing in return. Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever.